Hello, everybody, and welcome back to UXChange, the podcast where I exchange my user experiences to change them, and yours for the better. I'm Jeremy, a mentor and senior user researcher with over 8 years of experience and a background in neuroscience. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of engaging with hundreds of users around the world, spanning across Europe, the USA, Africa, and India. This has allowed me to deliver actionable insights that have improved user experiences with nutrition, automotive, delivery, and e-commerce sectors. I've created this podcast with the aim of providing my mentorship and educational content, offering actionable tips, knowledge, and guidance in the realm of research, specifically focusing on UX research to anyone having an interest in this area. And I hope that you will find this episode insightful.
One, two, three, four.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. So, if you just landed on this episode today and in the show as well, I highly encourage you to also listen to other episodes because sometimes I refer back to the content I covered in other episodes. They are meant to be quite standalones, all the episodes. However, this one is particular because it's the second episode of a 3-episode series on the common asked questions that I receive in mentorship sessions on usability testing. And so in the first episode, if you haven't listened to it, I highly encourage you to do so because I cover the actual flow of a usability test. So I cover topics such as how to conduct the usability test in terms of flow in itself, of course. So the introduction, the consent part, having a kind of contextual dive in, approaching things progressively, then having this kind of funnel approach, let's say, and then conducting the test in itself with a scenario, a task, the aspect of the think aloud, the scales that we can give, the post-test interview, let's say, or follow-up questions. We can also refer to it this way. And finally, we end with thanking the participant. So this is more for the architecture of a usability test. And today I wanted to cover a second aspect, which is how to write a usability task. So it's something that has been consistently asked in my mentorship sessions. First of all, it's totally normal not to be quite sure on how to phrase usability tasks, and to be perfectly honest, even if you're senior or lead or manager with 10, 15, 20 years of experience, it's always a kind of challenging exercise because you have to gather a lot of information beforehand on, first of all, the system you're about to make the user's tests. So you have to know about the flow, you have to know about your users, about the potential goals they want to accomplish, about the needs, why are they using this system or this app, this service, whatever, this product. So you need to have this information in mind. This information can come from previous research. So for instance, if you did discovery research and then you developed a product to answer users' needs or to try to solve a problem, then you can reuse the information you gathered in the discovery research. If you imagine you just joined a team who started to work on a prototype, but they have no foundational research, it might be a bit tricky for you. And if you are asked to actually test this prototype in terms of usability, and if there is no other way around because these are the needs of the team and you have to comply and so on this topic, I highly encourage you to listen to my other episodes. I honestly don't know in which episode I talk about this, but I remember that there is an approach, if you're confronted to this, to actually combine the usability test with the discovery research, so more open-ended questions first, and to combine the results to have an overview of your user's needs, even if you arrive at the stage of evaluation in this double diamond process of design thinking. However, you will still have to design, of course, this usability task. And so if you have no information whatsoever from past user research conducted by the team, you will need to make some assumptions. So, things you need for designing a usability task is, of course, information about your users and about the product. But about your users, the most important part is the actual user's needs and the goals. So, if we take some theory into account before designing your usability task, so there are several models defined in user experience. I don't have them in details in my mind, but I know that users' needs are actually the root of users' behavior. So we behave in a certain way to accomplish a goal, and this goal, we have it in mind because it is here for us to fulfill a need, right? And so that's why users, when they experience a problem, it's because there are unmet needs. And when they use a product or a service, this is the actual jobs to be done theory. It's because they hire this product or this service to actually perform a job. But at the root of this job that they want the product to perform, it's actually a goal. So they have a goal in mind. I don't know. I am in a banking app, and so I downloaded, or let's say a budgeting app. I downloaded this budgeting app, and I downloaded it, and I want to use it because I want to actually track my expenses. So this is a goal. So this is really pragmatic. It is specific. Think about the SMART goals, SMART definition of the goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So I want to track my expenses. It's specific enough, of course. It's measurable because I know where I should go to track my expenses, in what amount of time, more or less. Maybe I have this in mind, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying here to make the parallel to try to communicate the idea that goals are super pragmatic. However, the needs, it's what is at the root of this goal, basically. So if we take the approach of observing a user, having a kind of behavior, and asking multiple times why. So for instance, why are you clicking here? Why are you heading to that menu of tracking? Because I want to track my goals. That's the first level. I want to track my expenses, sorry. So that's the first level. So here you have maybe the information about the goal. And if you ask why do you want to track your expenses? Well, because I want to make sure that I'm not in negative into my account. Okay, interesting. We are diving deeper into the needs here. But why don't you want to be in negative into your in your bank account? Well, because I want to take care of my finances, and I want to be thriving financially, and so on and so forth, right? And so by asking this kind of questions about the whys, there's actually a methodology called the 5 whys. You can deep dive into the root of a behavior, of a problem, of a goal, and so on and so forth. Why am I telling you all of this? Because when we conduct discovery research, that's actually what we do. We ask our users, and when you are, commuting, what are you doing in your car? Okay, you're doing this. Why, and why, and why, and so on and so forth, right? This allows us to identify needs, problems, pain points, and goals. So this is why discovery research is here, to identify the user problem. So what is the problem? When is it happening? Why is it happening? And so on and so forth. And so once you have this information, this is the actual information you will use to design your usability task. So the best is to have this information from discovery research, to have this need in mind and this goal in mind, because you will need to design your usability task accordingly. If you don't have it, you can do some desk research, identify what are common users' needs in the realm of XYZ product. So you could do that and come up with assumptions, and it would be perfectly fine, in my opinion, in general. Depends on the level of specificity of your product, but you should be fine with that. So why am I telling all this? Because when you want to test let's say a product or a feature inside of a product, there are some rules to respect to design your usability task. Your task should be goal focused. You shouldn't say to the user, for instance, click here or click there, or find the option that refers to blah blah blah, and then you mention the words in the interface. These are big no-goes because you're actually leading the user. And even if you want to actually measure these kind of things, well, first of all, you don't want to measure that. We never want to measure that, because this is a natural waterfall data that you will gather when your user is trying to reach the goal. You don't want to this information. What you want is, how is the user performing the goal, and how are they taking the steps required to reach their goal, and is it matching with the actual product you are wanting to test. And so there is this first level of, okay, imagine you need to track your expenses. So be careful here when you design your task to not mention words that are in the interface, because you will be leading your participant. It will be too easy, and it will not give you relevant information actually. So imagine in your interface you mention things such as tracking expenses or expense tracker. Well, you would avoid to say, imagine you want to track your expenses. No, you should say something like, you want to gather some information related to your past purchases and the amount and following up and so on and so forth. I'm making this up, but you get the idea. So the idea is really to lead the user as little as possible, because you want to see the correspondence between the goal and how they achieve it. And then along the way, that's when you ask questions, when it's moderated. So there are some differences with the unmoderated tests. We will talk about this after, but when it's moderated, this is the approach you would take. You say, for instance, so imagine you should find information related to the past amounts of money you spent on past purchases. Imagine something like this. So you give this task, and then you observe the user actually taking the steps to do it. This will take you. This will give you information related to, is your interface easy to use, intuitive, are things named properly, is the navigation, content, interaction pleasing, solving users' goals. That's the main goal of the usability task. And then along the way, you will measure some aspects. So, for instance, are they finding the next steps they should take? Do they understand the copy inside the interface? Is the interaction intuitive, let's say? What about the navigation? So all of these questions, you can ask them at each screen. So something like, for instance, okay, you landed on this screen. First of all, what are your first impressions? What do you notice first? Okay, why do you notice this first? What does it evoke you, for instance? Okay, that could be one question you can ask in moderated sessions. It depends, of course, everything on your research questions, but you can ask this kind of question. Then you can ask things like, okay, and if we consider that aspect in the interface, what do you think about this? If you want to test a specific feature inside your interface, you could ask that. You could also say, okay, what would be your next step and what do you expect will happen? This is super useful because you want to know what would be the natural next step in the mind of your users. You want to know that before they see anything, because when they see it, a lot of the times we will think, oh yeah, okay, it's okay. Yeah, it's not what I thought about, but it's okay. It does the job and so on. Sometimes they won't even tell you it's not what they thought about. So you want to gather this information unbiased, let's say. So you observe them, you ask some questions, and so on and so forth. And you avoid sentences, phrases, words inside of the interface. And that would be approximately it. So it should be basically broad so that they can approach the task depending on their needs, because this will actually give you broad a broad range of possibilities depending on your users. Maybe someone, to access a expense tracker, will go first into their account, into the I don't know, the past movements of the account, and then they will look for a graph, a spreadsheet, or whatever. They will look for something. Maybe someone else in the homepage, they will expect to have a shortcut of expense tracker. So that's why you need to be absolutely broad. This is for moderated testing. Well, it will be the same for unmoderated, to be honest, but we are not measuring the same thing. In moderated testing, we can ask follow-up questions. In unmoderated, because you're not, of course, moderating, as the name implies, you will not be able to do such thing. And so that's why there is a tricky part here. And actually, I would like to make a course on this, a full course on how to adapt in this new era of evaluating interfaces and conducting user tests unmoderated. It's gaining each time more, let's say, space, this type of user research being unmoderated, because companies want results faster and faster every time, and so researchers have every time a bit less. Each time less time, if that makes sense, to conduct moderated usability tests. So that's why unmoderated is gaining, let's say, traction, and so you will have the probability to land a job in a company in which they are doing only unmoderated tests. And because there is no other way around, because this is the pace and you have to comply. Imagine you're in an e-commerce. In e-commerce, it's actually very often the case. So that's why you will need to adjust, because what you can do in moderated, you cannot do it in unmoderated, and vice versa. So let's just remind very quickly the differences between the two. In moderated, you can ask questions in between. In unmoderated, you cannot. Although now with AI, I know that Maze is capable of this, to ask follow-up questions, but based on AI. But in general, you cannot. In unmoderated, you need to give your goal and your instructions as clearly as possible, because you will not be here to moderate. If your user has a question or they don't understand something, you will not be able to be here to moderate and to actually, you shouldn't be answering questions, but if that happens, in any case, you cannot. So you need to be super prepared. It needs to be understandable, do a big dry run, and so on. And so everything should be fine. Then regarding follow-up questions, it's actually super tricky. It really depends on the platform you're using. I know really much user testing. I know as well Maze. If you have the choice, I really recommend you, and I have no sponsorship, okay, just to make sure. I'm not affiliated and so on. It's just personal experience. I really love Maze for unmoderated usability testing, because they have what I call, I don't know if it's the right term, they have a deep integration of the prototype. Meaning, the prototype is actually really, how can I say, it's articulated with the Maze interface, which is not the case with user testing, for instance. In user testing, when it's the time for users to test the prototype, they will have to click on a link, and then they are taken to another tab. It opens another tab on their browser, and we are observing what they are doing, but that's it. With Maze, we can actually, how can I say, track very precisely what they are doing at each step, because it's embedded. And so the metrics are actually tracking everything. Including, in terms of results, it can give you heat maps. So the most clicked areas, also the wrong clicks, and so on. So in my opinion, on this matter, Maze is better than user testing. And so that's why you need to take into account the tool because of the capabilities. And maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think that in Maze, you can actually ask questions depending on the screen your participants are on, which is not the case with user testing. In user testing, it's actually decorrelated. So they have a task to follow, and they could actually go through the whole prototype and then forget to go to the next task, asking a question about a particular screen. Whereas in Maze, if I'm not wrong, I think you can ask questions per screen. So for instance, screen A, okay, what are you seeing here? What is your impression? What do you want to do next? And what do you expect will happen? Screen B, what are you seeing here? And so on and so forth. I think you cannot, well, I'm sure you cannot do that with user testing, and I think you can do it with Maze. So that's why. So why am I saying all that? Because in unmoderated usability tests, you have to do the follow-up questions if you want to do it. If you do a kind of quali unmoderated test, I know it sounds weird, but it happens a lot on e-commerce. You need to ask your follow-up questions in the same questions that in the same section than your first question. For instance, you can say, imagine you need to track your expenses. Let's keep it simple. And so you tell your participant, okay, use the prototype to do so. Show us how you would do it. Before doing any action, please move on to the next step in the script. And so your user will go to the next step, and on the next step, for instance, they launch the prototype and it asks, what is your impression at this screen? Okay, and then you can ask, at each one of the screens, tell us about your impression, think out loud, and so on and so forth. But it will be very difficult to actually ask a specific question. For instance, what do you think about this menu? At screen number 3 out of 6, it's super difficult because your user might be desynchronized with the script. That's my whole point. Okay, so how do I circumvent that? Usually, so I ask multiple questions at each step. So it's kind of follow-up. That's one way. It's not optimal at all because your user has actually to answer multiple questions at once. Another trick that I use, and it actually works pretty well, is I let them go over the whole usability task, and then if I want to ask questions about a specific screen, I will not interrupt the usability task itself. I will introduce them with a screenshot of that particular screen. So let's say your flow has 6 screens, for instance. Your participant will go over the 6, and once it's finished, you can ask, okay, now you will be submitted an image, and this image can be, I don't know, screen number 3. Okay, and now they see the screenshot, they cannot click anywhere, but it's just to reprompt them, okay, and reprobe them, and to ask them specific questions about the screen. So it has some advantages, some inconvenience, but the advantage is that you're not disturbing the main flow of the usability test, okay? The drawback is that the feedback is not given directly in the moment because they can forget to think aloud as it's not moderated. But that's what I wanted to tell you about how to basically run a usability task, how to organize it depending on if it's moderated, unmoderated, how to design a goal-oriented task. It's really important. Some do's and don'ts. And that's pretty much it. I hope you learned at least one thing in this episode. If so, and if you haven't done it, please rate this podcast, rate this episode. It will really help me in terms of visibility. And of course, you have all the details in the description. If you want to head over to my website, give some feedback. I would really, really appreciate it. That would help me to improve. And feel free to be totally unbiased. As a researcher, I'm used to that, and so that would really help me. Again, thanks a lot for listening to this episode. Thank you for your trust, and I cannot wait to do the next one, which will be about how to define usability testing metrics. So we'll go over some metrics for unmoderated usability testing, why you should measure in moderated usability testing, and how you can potentially analyze all of these results. So see you in the next episode. Bye-bye. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining me today on UXChange. I hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Make sure to subscribe in order for you not to miss the next episode. Share it if you liked it, and leave a review. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out directly to me. You can find all the details in the show notes. And see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Wanna hear you go.